He visited the grave every Sunday, not because it helped. He had been told by the therapist he had seen twice and stopped seeing because the therapist said things that required feeling, and feeling was something he had decided to postpone indefinitely. He had been told that visiting helped. It did not help. It was simply the thing he did. Every Sunday, at 10 o'clock, rain or sun, the grave of his son in the cemetery on the hill above the town. Daniel Ashworth, beloved son, 29 years old, gone 14 months. He had been walking the familiar path through the cemetery on a Sunday morning in November when he stopped. Someone was at the grave. Two small figures. He stood very still. Two girls, perhaps 4 years old, perhaps 5, identical, dark curls, small coats, kneeling in the wet grass in front of his son's grave with their hands pressed together, praying. He stood on the path and could not move. He heard one of them say, in the small, clear voice of a child who believes completely in what they are doing, "Papa, it's us again. We brought flowers. Grandma said you can see them from where you are. We hope that's true." He felt the world tilt. Because his son had no children, he had been certain of this. He had been wrong. His name was Edward Ashworth. He was 67 years old and had been, for 14 months, the particular kind of person that the loss of a child produces, a category of grief that has no adequate language because the language of grief was built for losses that follow the natural order, and the loss of a child is the natural order inverted. He had built Ashworth Industries over 40 years. He had built it from a single import company at 27 into something that employed 6,000 people and had revenues the financial press described with specific large numbers. He had built it with the particular focused intensity of someone who understood that building required everything and had given it everything. He had given Daniel everything to, or had believed he had. Daniel had been 29 when the accident happened. A car, a wet road, November. The same November in which Edward now visited the grave every Sunday and did not feel helped, and went anyway, because the alternative was the house, and the house was full of 14 months of not Daniel. He had been his son completely, not a perfect father. He had examined this with the specific honesty of someone who had too much time now and was using it to examine things he should have examined before. Not always present, not always the father who arrived rather than sent a message. But he had loved Daniel completely, and Daniel had known it, and that was the thing he held onto. When the examination became too honest, he walked the path on the Sunday morning in November. He saw the two figures at the grave. He stopped. They did not hear him approach. They were absorbed. The specific absorption of children doing something important. The complete focus of someone for whom the task at hand is the only task. Two girls, identical, the specific identical of twins, the particular mirror quality of two people who had arrived at the world together and had been together since. Dark curls, perhaps 4, perhaps 5. He was not good at children's ages, had not had occasion to be. Small bunches of flowers, wildflowers, the kind that grew at roadsides, the kind that a child could pick, kneeling in the wet November grass. "Papa, it's us again. We brought flowers. Grandma said you can see them from where you are. We hope that's true." The other one, he could not yet tell them apart, added, "I got a star at school for reading. I wanted to tell you. She got 2 stars," the first one said. "She's being modest. I got to stars, the second one confirmed. But I didn't want to boast. Papa doesn't mind boasting, the first one said. He said it's only boasting if it isn't true. Edward stood on the path. His son had said that. Exactly that. He had said it to Daniel when Daniel was perhaps 8 years old and had come home from school having won something and had been told by another child that talking about winning was boasting. Edward had said, "It's only boasting if it isn't true." He had forgotten he'd said it. His son had remembered. His son had told these children. He sat down on the path, not on a bench, on the path, which was where he sat when something was too large for standing. One of the girls turned. She saw him. She assessed him with the immediate thoroughness of a child who understood that adults sitting on paths required assessment. She nudged her sister. They looked at him together. "Are you all right?" One of them said. "No," he said. "Not exactly." They looked at each other. They came to him. They sat on the path beside him, one on each side, with the complete matter of fact of children who had decided that a person sitting on a path required company and were providing it. "This is our papa's grave," one of them said. "I know," he said. "Did you know our papa?" The other said. He looked at his son's grave. "Yes," he said. "I knew him very well." "How?" the first one said. He looked at them, at the dark curls, at the faces that were Daniel's face rearranged into something new and entirely themselves, at the particular expression of two children who were waiting for an answer. "He was my son," he said. The twins looked at each other. Then they looked at him. "You're our grandfather," one of them said. Not a question. The specific clarity of a child who has just understood something and is stating it as fact. "I think," he said, "I might be." Their names were Alice and Clara. Alice was the one who had reported the 2 stars. Clara was the one who had suggested modesty. These were, he understood within 20 minutes, entirely characteristic of their respective personalities. Alice direct and unashamed, Clara thoughtful and slightly more cautious. Both of them completely themselves in the way of children who had been raised to be. "How old are you?" he said. 4 3/4, Alice said. "She always says the 3/4, Clara said. "Because it matters," Alice said. "In 3 months we'll be 5. That's different." "Different how?" "5 is a whole hand," Alice said, holding up her hand. 4 is almost a whole hand. Almost isn't the same. He looked at his hands. "No," he said. "It isn't. Do you come here too?" Clara said. She was looking at the grave with a specific attentiveness she brought to things that mattered. "Every Sunday," he said. "We come on Sundays too," Clara said. "Grandma brings us. She says Papa can hear us better on Sundays." "Why Sundays?" "Because," Alice said, "it's quieter. Grandma says heaven is busy in the week." He almost, for the first time in 14 months, almost smiled. "Where is your grandmother now?" he said. "At the gate," Clara said. "She waits. She says this is our time with Papa. She doesn't come to the grave herself." The twins looked at each other with the specific look of children sharing information they were deciding how to share. "She cries," Alice said, "when she comes to the grave. So she waits at the gates so we don't see. But we know," Clara said. "We always know." He looked at the gate, at the distant figure he had walked past without noticing. "I should speak to her," he said. "Yes," Alice said. "But we should tell her first, so she's not surprised." "Tell her what?" "That we found you," Alice said. with the complete certainty of someone who had not found him by accident. "We've been coming every Sunday for 6 months. We thought if we kept coming you might be here too." He looked at her. "You were looking for me?" he said. "Grandma said Papa had a father," Clara said. "She said he loved you very much." She paused. "She said you didn't know about us. She said it was complicated." "Yes," he said. "It's complicated. We thought," Alice said, "that complicated things got less complicated if you just kept going." He looked at the 2 4-year-olds sitting on the path beside him. "Who told you that?" he said. "Papa," Clara said. "In the letters." "The letters," he said. "He wrote us letters," Alice said. "Before. Grandma gives us one every birthday." She looked at the grave. He knew he might not be there, so he wrote the letters so we'd still have him. He walked to the gate. The twins walked beside him, one on each side, with the natural ease of children who had decided where they were going and were going there. Alice had taken his hand. He had not planned for this. He looked down at the small hand in his. He had not held a child's hand in. He could not remember. He had not held Daniel's hand since Daniel was perhaps 6 or 7, the age at which children decided that hand-holding was no longer required. He had thought, at the time, that this was a small loss. He had not understood it was the beginning of the particular series of small losses that constituted a child growing up. He understood it now. The woman at the gate was perhaps 60. She had dark hair that was going gray. Daniel's hair, the specific color of it, the way it sat. She was standing with the particular posture of someone who had been waiting and had seen something unexpected coming toward her and was deciding what to do with the unexpectedness. She saw him. She understood immediately. He could see it in her face. The specific recognition of someone who had been told what someone looked like and is now seeing them. The twins walked up to her. "Grandma," Alice said. "We found him." The woman looked at him. He looked at her. "Mrs." He started. "Miriam," she said. "Miriam Collins. Edward Ashworth," he said. "I know," she said. "You know," he said. "Daniel talked about you," she said. "Often." He looked at the grave on the hill. "He never told me," he said. "About the girls." "I know," she said. "Why?" She looked at her granddaughters. "That," she said, "is a conversation for later. When they're not listening." Alice looked up. "We're always listening," she said. "I know," Miriam said. "That's why it's later." They sat in the cafe near the cemetery gate. The twins had hot chocolate, which Alice had specified must have marshmallows, and Clara had specified must not be too hot because last time it burned, and were occupied with the specific occupation of children who had been promised they could choose a pastry afterward. Miriam looked at her hands. "Daniel found out about the girls," she said, "when they were 2 months old. Therefore," he said. "Yes," she said. "He knew for almost 5 years. He was very still. Their mother," Miriam said, "was my daughter, Anna. She and Daniel," she paused. "It was not a simple relationship. They were together and then not together, and then together again in the way of young people who love each other and don't know how to say it and keep almost getting it right. And the girls," he said. "Anna died," Miriam said, "when they were 6 months old. A blood clot. Sudden." She said it with the specific plainness of someone who has said it many times. "Daniel came to us. He said he wanted to be their father. Properly. He was," Edward said. "He was," Miriam confirmed. "Completely. Every weekend. Every school event he could get to. Every birthday. She stopped. He was extraordinary with them. Why didn't he tell me? Miriam looked at him. She said carefully, that you and he had been. She paused. He said there had been a difficult period. In his 20s. He said he was afraid. Edward looked at the table. The difficult period. 3 years in which he and Daniel had been. Not estranged, not dramatically. Something more painful than dramatic. Distant. The specific distance of two people who loved each other and had hurt each other and did not know how to cross the space that had grown. They had crossed it. Eventually. The last 4 years had been. He had thought the last 4 years had been the beginning of something. The repair of something. He had thought they had time. He was afraid, Edward said, that I would. He was afraid, Miriam said gently, that knowing about the girls would make things complicated again. He said he wanted to tell you when things were, when he was sure. Sure of what? Sure that you were the grandfather he wanted them to have, she said. He loved you. He just needed to be certain. Edward looked at his hands. He didn't have time to be certain, he said. No, Miriam said. He didn't. Clara finished her hot chocolate. She looked at Edward with the specific attentiveness she brought to important things. Grandma says Papa wrote you a letter too, she said. Edward looked at Miriam. Miriam opened her bag. He gave it to me, she said. 2 years ago. He said if anything happened before he told you. She held out the envelope. He said I would know when. He looked at the envelope. His name on the front. Daniel's handwriting. He had not seen Daniel's handwriting in 14 months. He took the envelope. He did not open it immediately. Can I? He said. Of course, Miriam said. He walked outside. He stood in the November air and opened the envelope and read his son's handwriting and felt the particular feeling of someone receiving something they have needed for a very long time and did not know how to ask for. He read it twice. He stood outside for a long time. When he came back in, Alice looked at his face. The letters make you cry, she said. But in the good way. Yes, he said. In the good way. That's what Papa said, Alice said. He said crying in the good way means something true arrived. He looked at the letter in his hand. Yes, he said. It does. He did not share the letter. It was his. Between him and his son. The specific private of something written by a young man who had wanted to say something and had not known if he would get the chance. But the shape of it he carried. Daniel had written about the difficult years, had written about them, with the specific honesty of someone who had thought about them carefully and had arrived at understanding rather than blame. He had written about being afraid, about not knowing how to begin, about wanting to get it right and running out of time. He had written about Alice and Clara, the specific detail of them, the way Alice always said the 3/4. The way Clara was thoughtful and modest and fierce about the things that mattered to her. The way they had their mother's eyes and their grandfather's stubbornness. Yes, Dad, I know where I got it from. And the particular laugh that arrived without warning and filled a room. He had written, I wanted you to know them. I kept meaning to find the right moment. I think I was afraid there wasn't a right moment for this, that any moment would be too much or too little. I think I was wrong about that. I think you would have handled it better than I feared. You've gotten better at the hard things. I noticed that. I should have told you I noticed. He had written, they need a grandfather, not a replacement for anything, just someone who tells them the truth and shows up and loves them in the specific way that grandfathers do. I think you know how to do that. I think you've been waiting for the chance. He had written, Dad, I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, but I think, wherever I am, I think I'm glad you're reading this. I think I'm glad you found them. He came back the following Sunday. At 10 o'clock, he had called Miriam on the Thursday. A conversation that had been, he thought afterward, the most honest conversation he had had in 14 months. Not easy. Nothing about this was easy, but honest. They had an arrangement. He met them at the gate. Alice and Clara came down the path with Miriam, and Alice was already talking about the star, which had become to more stars in the week, and about a girl at school named Priya who had very strong opinions about which color was best, and about the drawing she had made of the cemetery which she wanted to show him. Why did you draw the cemetery? He said. Because, Alice said, it's where we found you. I wanted to remember what it looked like. Clara held his hand. Not dramatically, she simply put her hand in his as they walked up the path, with the natural ease of someone doing something they had decided was correct. He looked down at her hand. He thought about Daniel at 6 or 7, the age at which children decided hand-holding was no longer required. He thought, I have more time with these two. Grandpa Edward, Alice said. He looked at her. She had decided the name in the car. Miriam had told him. She had tried several versions. Mr. Ashworth, grandfather, grandpa, and had settled on Grandpa Edward because, she had explained, it was both formal and friendly, and that seemed right for someone they had just found. Yes, he said. Do you know how to make pancakes? She said. No, he said. We'll teach you, Alice said. We make them every Sunday after. After what? After Papa, she said. We always make pancakes after. It's the rule. He looked at Miriam. Miriam was looking at her granddaughters with the expression of someone who is watching something happen that they have been hoping for and is not going to say anything that might interrupt it. I would like to learn, he said. Good, Alice said. Clara makes them better, but I'm faster. Different skills, Clara said. Exactly, Alice said. They reached the grave. The twins arranged their flowers. They had brought more wildflowers, and a drawing that Alice had folded carefully and placed against the headstone. It's the cemetery, Alice told the grave. So you can see where we are. Edward stood behind them. He had come to this grave every Sunday for 14 months. He had been alone. He was not alone now. He looked at his son's name on the stone. He thought about a letter and 3 quarters, and to stars and pancakes on Sundays, and a child's hand in his on a November path. He thought, I think you knew. I think you arranged this. He thought, thank you. The kitchen smelled of butter and Sunday morning. Miriam's kitchen, small, warm. The specific warmth of a kitchen that had been cooking things for a long time, and remembered all of them. Alice was explaining the process with the authority of a master chef. The bubbles, she said. You wait for the bubbles. When the bubbles come all the way through, that's when you flip. And not before, Clara said. He flipped before the bubbles last time. I was practicing, Alice said. The first 3 were practice, Clara confirmed. These are the real ones. Edward watched the bubbles. Now, he said. Alice assessed the pan with the thoroughness she brought to all important assessments. Now, she said. He flipped. The pancake landed correctly. Alice said, good. With the specific satisfaction of a teacher whose student has performed adequately. Clara said, better than last time. Last time was practice, Alice said. He's getting better, Clara said to Miriam, as a separate assessment delivered to a separate audience. Miriam looked at Edward. He was watching the pancake with the specific concentration of someone who had been given a task and was taking it seriously. She thought about a young man who had written a letter and kept it for 2 years and had been afraid and had not had enough time. She thought he would be glad of this. She thought he arranged this. Grandpa Edward, Clara said. He looked at her. Papa used to say, she said, that the best Sunday was one where something important happened and then you had pancakes. He looked at the pancake in the pan. He thought about a November path and 2 girls praying and a letter and a small hand. And the specific feeling of someone who has found something they did not know they had lost. Something important happened, he said. Yes, Clara said. So the pancakes are exactly right. He visited the grave every Sunday, not because it helped, because it was what he did. On a Sunday in November, he found 2 small figures kneeling in the wet grass. Papa, it's us again. We brought flowers. He had been certain his son had no children. He had been wrong. 4 3/4. Dark curls. Wildflowers. 2 stars for reading. They had been coming every Sunday for 6 months, waiting for him. Here is what we learned. Grief is not a room you leave. It is a room that changes when the right people walk into it. He had been visiting a grave. He found 2 granddaughters who had been looking for him. A son who had written letters so his daughters would still have him. And for their grandfather, who had been waiting without knowing what he was waiting for. Alice said, complicated things get less complicated if you just keep going. She was 4 3/4. She was completely right. Keep going. Keep visiting the grave. Keep showing up. Keep walking the path even when it doesn't help. Because one Sunday, the thing you need most might be kneeling in the wet grass, waiting for you to arrive. And it will have dark curls, and wildflowers, and 2 stars for reading. That is everything.